Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Office Bloke Dan.
Together we are the Office Blokes.
We are.
It is true. What is the UK's World War III plan?
For me, just whatever comes.
Don't know really.
Take it as it comes, whatever happens.
What happens when they run out of pasta next time, Mike? In the supermarkets, what are you going to do?
Chicken.
Rice.
Ooh.
Enough rice
That'll be the
instead.
next to go. That'll be
Yeah,
the next to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Stacey at the weekend was telling me that they burst a water pipe or something in Timperley over Christmas,
Yeah.
and there was no water for over a week
Yeah,
at her
they
place.
had to bring it all in, didn't they? In trucks.
Yeah.
I saw all the trucks
Oh,
on the
yeah,
side of the
the
street.
places.
Trucks and
Yeah.
bottled water and stuff, and it's like a week
I know.
without running water
I know.
is madness, isn't it?
Yeah.
You think how quickly something like that can happen and what you're going to do.
I know, yeah.
Well, it's third
Exactly,
world
yeah.
there now, simply.
You get some really good crispy duck though. Let's check it out. It's a bit of infographics, who we've not done for a little bit. The UK's World War III plan. Let's go for it.
The United Kingdom is no longer seen as a Tier 1 fighting force, so said a U.S. senior general in a private conversation with British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace. Upon the news breaking, the British public was outraged at the U.S. until defense analysts began to appear on talk shows to explain that the assessment was in fact correct. According to a British analyst, the UK military was unable to protect its home
British were
islands,
hot.
let alone
I'm pretty sure hot.
Analyst.
That's what he said, didn't
Philip Schofield.
he? Yeah. Loads of them over here.
help defend its allies. How in the world did one of the world's most premier fighting forces get to a state where it couldn't even defend its own homeland? And what would the UK do in case of a third global war? While the UK military might be in a state of serious decline, the British government is at least much more forward-thinking than most of its European neighbors, realizing that the war in Ukraine presented Europe with two choices: support Ukraine in fighting Russia in Ukraine today, or possibly fight Russia in Central Europe later. The UK opted for the former and opened up its armories to the Ukrainian military. Despite the military being in seriously short supply of air defense missiles and anti-tank weapons, the UK nonetheless started shipping them to Ukraine about as fast as it could load them onto the ships. Meanwhile, countries such as France, Germany, Spain, and Portugal have all been reluctant to provide large amounts of equipment of their own, stating that they need to be prepared to defend themselves in the future. And this begs the question of from what? With Russia struggling to hold on.
I've thought about this quite a lot though. Do you not think they're getting sent a lot of end-of-life munitions that we're going to need to be replaced within 5 or 10 years anyway?
Yeah, because we're going to need them now.
Yeah, because they need them now, but then that's a way of offloading stuff that's soon going to be obsolete.
Yeah, possibly.
And then replenishing it with
Yeah.
new stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
When they pay the debt back, you mean?
Yeah, because they're not getting all this stuff for free.
No.
You know, who do you think's rebuilding the Ukraine
Yeah.
when the war's over? I think
Chinese.
Well, it depends who wins. Doesn't it?
To East Ukraine, it's incredibly unlikely they'll be marching T-72s into Madrid anytime soon. But were the UK to find itself needing to fight Russia head-on, the end result is very much in question given the atrocious state of the modern British military. How did an elite fighting force, America's most capable Cold War partner, turn into what Allied soldiers in the Middle East would call the borrowers, for their propensity to never have all the kit they needed for a mission? Like most European powers, the UK fell prey to the Cold War peace dividend. With the fall of the Soviet Union, Europe assumed that the new Russia would renounce its historical ambitions for the empire, beat all their AK-47s into plowshares, and resolve all future conflicts with tactical hugs. Defense budgets dropped significantly, and research and development as well as procurement programs all but atrophied. Spending money on defense became a rude conversational topic, and political suicide for any politician to even broach. War was best left to the Neanderthal Americans. Europe had established an impenetrable utopia defended almost entirely by good vibes that no weapon could pierce. On the one hand, it's hard to judge Europe for wanting to forget the absolute pants-browning terror of the Cold War taking place in their own backyards. Americans were always wary of World War III to the point of every other family building a fallout shelter, but Europeans had to worry about the horror of either nuclear or conventional war playing out in their very own living rooms. Europe was exhausted of war. Hard to blame the continent for wanting to reinvest massive and arguably non-sustainable defense budgets on other things. But getting to a point where Britain's own politicians have said that the country only has enough ammunition for a few days of fighting is downright criminal. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, because also by their own admission, the UK would be wholly incapable of defending itself from the type of air attacks taking place in Ukraine. And if the nation wanted to field a single division of 30,000 troops, it would take between 5 to 10 years to equip them with sufficient tanks, helicopters,
Jeez.
and artillery. Of the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles,
The government have put a limit on how many bullets you can have as a gun owner as well.
What over here? You mean?
Yeah. There's always been limits, but it's quite regulated now. If you shoot rifles, justify how much ammo you've got. You're not allowed over a certain amount of ammo.
Why?
So just don't want people stockpiling ammunition. But if we've only got enough to last like 3 days of fighting off an enemy force,
Yeah, we've got nuclear weapons.
yeah, but you can't use that if someone's invading, can you?
Yeah,
Going to do nuke Cornwall
do the whole.
posturing thing.
Everyone gets it.
Yeah, yeah. Get out, otherwise
Yeah,
I'm
that's
taking
it.
my ball
Yeah.
home.
vehicles it does have, most are between 3 to 6 decades old and have no replacement in the pipeline. And if the UK was called upon to support its NATO partners, 30% of its high readiness forces are reservists, who can never make NATO timelines for deployment, undermining the entire alliance. The first signs of trouble came with the British commitment to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which many blamed the US for dragging the UK into, but technically is just payback for previously dragging the US into scheming to protect British oil interests in Iran, and we all know how that's played out, so everyone's even Stevens as far as we're concerned. After the end of the Cold War, the British military began to ramp down and prepare for low-intensity operations. However, Iraq and Afghanistan proved to be higher-intensity conflicts than anticipated, and a military that had been put on course for a low-intensity fight was suddenly thrust into a conflict it wasn't fully prepared for. With operations in both countries, though, the UK quickly discovered it simply didn't have the resources to fight in two theaters simultaneously. By June 2010, the cost to the UK for both wars had risen to $31 billion, and this was in the wake of the 2008 global financial crisis. Even as the price tag kept increasing, the British government was discussing how to further reduce military spending, prompted by a new government which had inherited a budget deficit of about 12% of GDP. As Prime Minister Cameron's government came into power, they initiated an austerity plan to fix UK's finances. This made it impossible to realign and refocus British military priorities, and complicated resolving a £38 billion overhang in the military equipment budget alone. The military equipment wish list was heavily frowned upon and thought exorbitant, given that the military itself had shrunk significantly from 220,000 in 1998 to about 102,000 by 2010. Cameron's government unleashed the Strategic Defence and Security Review, which was in effect a severe cost-cutting plan to gut the UK military. Under its guidance, the British Army shrank from 102,000 to 82,000, a 20% drop, and had 40% of its Challenger 2 tank fleet scrapped. Self-propelled artillery, much more expensive to equip and maintain than towed artillery, also got the axe, with Britain scrapping 35% of its inventory. Another victim was the Royal Navy's HMS Ark Royale, decommissioned in April 2011, which eliminated its entire naval air fleet arm. Its 72 Harriers were sold to the U.S. Marine Corps for the bargain price of $180 million. A hell of a deal, considering at the time of their acquisition, the Harrier fleet would have cost the UK around $2 billion. With no carrier or maritime patrol capability of its own, Britain was forced to rely on its allies when it intervened in the First Libyan Civil War. Operation Ellamy was an attempt to prove that the UK was still a relevant European power, but it came at a severe cost as its military stockpile of precision weapons was seriously depleted, and to this day they have not been fully replaced. Despite this, the British military continued to experience cuts. Military leadership began to grow quite vocal with their discontent, appearing on primetime news shows to voice concern about the readiness of the UK military. In response, they were promised a 1% increase in equipment purchases from 2015 to 2020. The government also made plans to increase total defense spending by 5% between 2020 and 2021.
What have the government been spending all this money on?
Well, friends, track and trace systems.
If Rishi Sunak's wife started a military firm making tanks
Oh, we'd have the
tomorrow,
biggest
then
military in the
we'd have
world.
loads, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Putting an order for 5 billion
Yeah.
quid's
We'd
worth
all
of
have one.
tanks.
Yeah.
Be more than that. Be trillions.
It's mad, isn't it? Like, what is it, 12 years of austerity?
And
And
still shit.
it's worse now than it was at the beginning of all that.
Yeah, it's a. I'm waiting for for them to knock on my door. I'm going to kidnap them.
What, because they came to you?
Yeah.
Anyone in particular, or just anyone who knocks?
Anyone, any politician, apart from the Greens, I'm just not going to answer to them. I'll just let them go.
It's just bad, isn't it? Like, what's actually happened? I don't want to get too political,
Political,
but
no,
over
it's just a
12
mess.
years of just
It's a mess.
the roads are a mess. It looks like the military's
Everything's
a mess.
a mess. It's a joke of a country. Prisons are overcrowded. People are just taking over.
It's madness, isn't it? It's absolute madness.
It's when the pubs are closing down.
The pubs have always
Yeah.
been closing down. They
Not-
at an
Only
alarming rate.
in the last
Yeah.
10 years, at an alarming rate.
They put up alcohol duty recently as
Yeah,
well,
they did.
didn't they?
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go to some pubs and it's like £5.50, £6 a pint. And
That's the cheap ones.
well, people may pay that in Hale or somewhere, but they're not paying that in smaller little towns.
That's the cheaper ones, £5.50 at £6, £7, £7.50 now.
It was, I got those 2 double pinters at the Apollo. That was 32 quid for those 2 drinks. But it was 4 pints,
Yeah.
so that works out at like,
Yeah.
what is it, 7,
£8
£8 quid,
pounds,
something like
£8
that.
£8.
Even the schooling's gone to shit.
It's all bollocks,
Education.
isn't it?
And cancelled a round of equipment cuts to Britain's tank and artillery fleets. There were also plans to bring back Britain's carrier capabilities to the Royal Navy. And then Brexit happened, hurling the British economy into turmoil. Following hot on its heels, the global COVID pandemic did its best to further ruin Britain's military reinvestment plans by dragging the global economy into the ditch. But then, the new Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the largest investment in the Ministry of Defense since the Cold War, a 4-year funding deal that would add $21.9 billion to the military's budget and would be geared at rearmament and replenishment. Despite this, though, Britain was still planning significant cuts to its standing forces, specifically its army and its fleet of armored vehicles. Then, barely a year later, Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and Europe was shocked to discover that Russians had opted to resolve their problems with guns and artillery instead of the expected hugs. The economic disruption was global, and even more pressure was put on the UK military budget. Nonetheless, the UK has stepped up to the plate with $2.8 billion in military aid, over 200 armored vehicles, and 10,000 rounds of artillery ammunition. The real problem, though, is that the government currently has no means of backfilling everything that's been sent to Ukraine, prompting at least one MP to comment that the military could only fight for 5 days and then not defend the home islands from invasion. So how in the world would Britain aid its allies in a Third World War? For decades after the Cold War, Britain figured that its role in any future conflict would be largely in the air and at sea, prompting its biggest budget cuts to fall squarely on the Army. Its fleet of Challenger 2 main battle tanks has shrunk to 213 vehicles, but that fleet is facing even more cuts, down to just 148 Challenger 3s by 2030. But this won't be a new tank acquisition, but merely an upgrade program of its Challenger 2s. So, despite some increased capability, the overall program is a net loss for British ground forces. Given typical readiness rates of around 75%, by 2030 Britain might have just over 100 tanks ready for war at any given time. And even just half the loss rates of those experienced in Ukraine, Britain would be out of tanks within a month or 2 of fighting. Its 721 infantry fighting vehicles are facing the prospect of similar cuts as the Army transitions from the Warrior IFV to the Ajax IFV. It plans to acquire 539 Ajaxes by 2029, and it's almost certain that the total fleet will not return to even the 721 Warriors currently in service. The nation has a pathetic artillery force mostly made up of 126 105mm howitzers. Significant reductions to its self-propelled guns has shrunk its force to just 89 155mm AS-90s, with 32 of those transferred to Ukraine. The transfers are expected to be replaced by the Swedish-built BAE Archer, which trades armor for mobility, and the UK already has 14 in service. The Archer is a stopgap purchase, though, as the Army figures out what vehicle will ultimately replace its AS-90 fleet. Its rocket artillery forces number at just 44 and are in the process of being upgraded to fire the American GMLRS Extended Range and Precision Strike Missile by 2025. To support its ground forces, the British Army has 44 attack helicopters, with 2 of these being upgraded Apache variants, the AH-64E. The fleet is actually expected to grow, however, with a total of 50 new helicopters on order to replace its aging fleet of license-built Apaches procured in 2004. The once legendary Royal Navy has suffered significant cuts as well. At sea, Britain operates 4 ballistic missile submarines as part of its nuclear triad, as well as 6 nuclear attack submarines. The old Trafalgar class is being retired, with the HMS Triumph slated to be decommissioned soon as it's replaced with the new Astute class. Britain has plans to purchase 7 of these nuclear-powered submarines, but as focus shifts to the Indo-Pacific and a war with China, more purchases are under consideration. However, given how long it takes to build ships and subs, it's likely already too late for any future purchases to do anything but replace combat losses. In 2017, the HMS Queen Elizabeth was commissioned, marking a triumphant return of the Royal Navy's aviation arm to the world's oceans. Now the UK operates 2 of the Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers, with each carrying a maximum of 36 F-35s, along with support rotary aviation. The largest vessels ever built for the Royal Navy, they pale in comparison to the 75 to 90 combat jets that a US supercarrier can field, and which China eventually hopes to match, but are a significant move back to becoming a significant naval power. The F-35 also gives the UK an outsized punch against any potential adversary, namely China or Russia, though the nation has been heavily criticized by the US after one of its former F-35 pilots was discovered to have been contracted as a consultant by the Chinese military. Its carriers are supported by 6 Type 45 destroyers, which are primarily equipped for an air defense role to protect friendly ships from enemy aircraft and missiles. These are supplemented by 11 Type 23 frigates, which, while being guided missile frigates, lack significant punching power against surface vessels. Instead, the Type 23s are optimized for anti-submarine warfare, leaving the anti-ship role largely up to its attack submarines or aircraft carriers. The Royal Air Force, meanwhile, finds itself in dire straits. Its air fleet has shrunk to just 137 Eurofighter Typhoons and 29 F-35s, which are jointly operated by its Fleet Air Arm. This leaves the Royal Air Force with basically just the Typhoon, and those are already being scrapped with the fleet shrinking by the year. The RAF does have plans to procure between 60 to 80 total F-35s, though it'll be sharing about half of those with the Navy. The Tempest, now in development, is expected to make up the bulk of the Royal Air Force by replacing the current fleet of Typhoons. But given the history of the British arms procurement, the Royal Air Force's outlook is grim as it attempts to defend British interests with a fleet of less than 200 combat aircraft. To make matters worse, the RAF has no operational advanced early warning and control aircraft, with an order for 5 being reduced to just 3 and expected to be delivered in 2024. It does still maintain 9 Poseidon anti-submarine and anti-ship aircraft, however, as would be expected given its duty to defend the UK-Greenland-Iceland line against Russian ships and submarines in case of war. So, how would the UK fight in a Third World War with such an anemic military? Britain's role in a major future conflict would be relegated to a support role, a serious demotion from its frontline role in both world wars. In a European conflict, Britain's biggest contribution to NATO would be its role as an unsinkable aircraft carrier for American long-range strike aircraft. With no dedicated bombers of its own, and such a small air fleet of which only about half would ever realistically be operational at any one time, British fighters would be best used to ensure the skies over and around the British Isles remain safe for Allied aircraft, especially for big American bombers like the B-52. Its Navy's greatest contribution would be in securing the all-important UK-Greenland-Iceland line, a picket line stretching across the North Atlantic. Russian vessels would seek to cross this picket in order to attack American shipping in the Atlantic. Though, given the state of the Russian Navy today, only its submarine forces would pose any threat. These Britain is well suited to tracking.
What are they going to do? Fucking walk through Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Northern Germany?
I know, yeah.
Eh?
I mean,
Estonia, Latvia.
It's a
We'll
long
just
way
go
to
this way. Yeah. Pass all these countries to the Britain's line.
Yeah.
We've done our bit anyway. Someone else's turn to take the reins.
Exactly.
All right. We'll take a step back on this one.
I think the Third World War will be fought in the East. I don't think it'll be fought here.
In the Far East or Middle East?
Middle East.
Middle East, yeah. It's looking that way at the moment, isn't it?
Isn't that in the Bible? Or like, there's some philosopher or something at one point that said, or alluded to the fact that it was going to be.
I only read true stuff like the Beano.
The Beano and the Dandy. Yeah. This is depressing, though, isn't it? It perfectly sums up the state of this country at the moment.
It does.
This
It
video.
does. It's a mess. It's the country's in a right shit state.
Yeah.
And
Where's
it's,
all the money going?
I know
Where is
exactly.
it?
I know. They tell you every day, right to your face.
I'm still not sure about the remark of like the ammunition we've done in the last 5 days. So it seems like a remark, sarcastic remark from someone from the opposition that's saying, "No, we've only lost about 5 days," and it's been.
Well, remember NATO,
it's been
aren't
taken
we?
out of context.
Remember NATO, so we're not going to go to war with anyone on our own.
No.
Anything we do now is in the NATO agreement.
I think if you look at countries' spend of GDP on the military budget throughout Europe, a lot of people have stripped it back to not a lot of money.
Massively. Yeah.
And it's like we're not the worst by far.
No, I think we might be the best in Europe.
I'm not sure we're the best, but we're
obviously over the last 15-20 years. Obviously, Russia's been seen less and less and less of a threat over the years, hasn't it? You know, so.
That's
why
European
save a bit of money.
You've got European powers here as well, like Germany, Spain, Portugal.
Yeah.
It's still
no, not France.
Italy.
Poland.
Poland.
Italy.
I think we'd be the ones bending over and taking it in the Third World War, though.
Just play a football match. Send the fans over with free tickets. Send the fans with free tickets. There you go. Playing these. Go and play that in Moscow.
I always like the optimist in me always likes to think there's more to it. You know, maybe our cybersecurity division is one of the best in the world.
Yeah, we're not.
There's got to be something we're doing that isn't being talked about.
I think a lot of it maybe is the size. I still think the training, some of the elite are still the best in the world. I really think they are, but.
Yeah, and our like undercover sort of like covert sort of like operations are quite elite as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
finding out ahead of time.
Yeah,
but I don't think I'm stockpiling enough food and weapons and stuff.
I
think I'm going to up my game.
I'm not asked.
I am.
I was going New Zealand.
How? When we get invaded? New Zealand embassy are going to send a private plane for you. Go and get Office Bloke Daz quick.
Might do.
Make sure he's all right.
Yeah. I'll start swimming. start digging on the beach.
And destroying, given its fleet of Poseidon aircraft and frigates, Britain would struggle to provide significant firepower for a land task force, and its forces would likely be relegated to a reserve force, to be held back and used in case of enemy breakthrough. As it would take weeks for Britain to fully meet its NATO commitments, its army would be important in relieving combat exhausted or depleted NATO forces from other nations. But lacking significant firepower, Britain's days as a frontline force are well in the past. As the next major global conflict is likely to occur in the Pacific against an increasingly belligerent China, Britain would be ever more hard-pressed to seriously support its American and Australian allies. However, a 2023 UK-Japan defense agreement has greatly increased ties between the two nations and allows for the deployment of their militaries within each other's nations. While small, a UK air or ground commitment in Japan would still be significant given its modern capabilities. And in a war over Taiwan, one can never have enough combat jets or ground-based air defenses protecting Japanese airfields. Its attack submarines could pose a significant headache for China, given their extreme stealth and lethality against a People's Liberation Army Navy that's still lagging significantly behind in anti-submarine warfare. Here, Britain's small undersea forces would have an outsized effect in helping the US and allies shut down Chinese shipping around Taiwan, though the strait itself is too shallow for safe operation.
What we're going to do, though, shoot Chinese boats that are delivering bullets to the UK so we can actually fight the war. Like we're gonna shoot those ships and sink them. Yeah. We've run out of medicine. We'll order some from China. Yeah. We sank the ship with all
Amazon
the medicine.
Next day delivery,
innit? Of attack submarines. Of its 2 aircraft carriers, it's likely only one would be operational at any one time. But an additional, if smaller, carrier in the Pacific would be a significant boost to U.S. efforts to prevent a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Its days as a global military power are firmly behind it, and its military is in a state of crisis, but Britain can still provide significant assistance to any Allied effort in the next major war. In the end, it's exactly these allies that are Britain's greatest strength, though the nation must ask itself if it hasn't been overly reliant on both its nuclear arsenal and the power of its allies to guarantee its own security. Now go watch France's World War III plan.
Hopefully it's worse than ours. That's bad.
I doubt they've got one.
France.
They've probably got a better one than us.
Reverse surrender.
Can't buy as many white flags as you can.
I think they've got a lot of fight in them nowadays, the French.
Yeah.
To be
So it
honest.
comes to it.
Well, who knows? Who knows? But that's I don't think.
Again, member of NATO, they ain't going to be fighting, are they?
Yeah.
They're going to be a part of a team.
Yeah, part
Exactly.
of
That's why everyone's downsized the military, because they've got NATO.
Yeah,
no point in stockpiling loads of shit you don't need.
When it boils down to it, they'll all be as one anyway,
Correct.
won't they? When you add them all together, then it'd be a sizable army. So I think you're
versus
right.
China, Russia.
It's like when I was at school. When I was at school,
know.
I could gob off as much as one because I had 2 big brothers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, wait there.
Yeah.
Big whistle. That's what we do here. Just say, oh yeah, wait there, and then phone up America, and
Yeah.
we're good to go. And say, told you, warned you, dickhead.
I think in a
I didn't stand
real,
behind America going,
Come on, son. Come on.
I think in a real World War III situation,
top field, me and you.
everyone would be struggling. It wouldn't be like America would just be like, here, just take all our stuff, because they'd have a war to fight as well.
It's going to be it's going to be fought over different ways. I think it's not what people expect.
Yeah.
I think the cyber part of it will be a big thing as well. I think you're absolutely right on that. I think that's going to be
modernisation.
I think it's going to be a big part of it. So
I think you'll always need boots on the ground in war, though.
possibly,
Probably.
I mean, during the Battle of Britain, I think we got down to something like 12 Spitfires, didn't we, defending the whole country? And then we just everyone got together and all the metal railings disappeared from everywhere, and they started just building and building. So really, we just need to be able to manufacture, and we could up it quite quickly and actually manufacture our own stuff again.
The problem we've got now is the youth of today. I mean, relying on them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, they'd be all on the phone. Everyone would be attacking and be on the phones, like, won't they? I mean, texting each other.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely nailed them.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice for us to take a back seat from a world war, though, and just be like, all right, you know, we'll
done our bit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yes,
I don't think it'll happen, but
it'll happen at some point. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's how long it is. Well, it's scratching at the surface at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's how it's fought. It's when it's going to happen, and who else is involved, and who wants to press that button, really, isn't it?
It's the politicians, isn't it? All wankers.
Yep, agreed.
Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.